The bright studio lights of Good Morning America burned with their usual warmth, a calculated glow meant to make every guest look approachable, polished, safe. Viewers tuned in expecting another breezy interview, another carefully packaged segment, designed to inform but never provoke. Yet that morning, the air seemed charged even before the cameras rolled, as if the studio itself knew something was about to fracture. Kim Kardashian took her seat with practiced poise. The sleek black dress, the immaculate contour, the calm, steady gaze. Everything about her appearance was engineered to project authority. She was not just the star of reality television anymore. She was a business empire, a cultural icon, and most recently, an aspiring advocate for prison reform. Millions watched, waiting to hear the polished script she had prepared. Across from her, Robin Roberts leaned forward at the desk, her notes neatly stacked, her tone warm but eyes sharpened. Robin had spent decades cutting through spin, and she carried herself with the gravity of a judge about to preside over testimony. She smiled faintly as the opening pleasantries faded, but there was little warmth in her gaze. "So, Kim," she began smoothly, her voice steady but edged with quiet intent. "Many people admire your efforts in criminal justice reform. But others wonder, is this about the work or about the brand?" The studio seemed to tighten around the question. Kim's polished smile flickered. For a heartbeat, she froze, her eyes darting briefly toward the cameras, then back to Robin. "I've dedicated myself to helping people who deserve second chances," Kim replied, her tone soft, rehearsed, the words flowing like lines from a script she had performed before. "When I worked to free Alice Johnson, I saw how broken the system really is. That changed everything for me." Robin did not nod. Instead, she leaned closer, her pen tapping lightly against her notes. A courtroom, attorney zeroing in on a witness. "But Alice Johnson's case also made headlines for you, didn't it? Your name was front-page news, your brand suddenly tied to justice. Some critics say you leveraged her struggle for your own visibility. What do you say to that?" The air thickened. Somewhere in the control booth, a producer exchanged nervous glances with the crew. This was not the soft focus segment they had promised Kim's team. Kim inhaled slowly, straightening her posture. "I didn't ask for attention," she said, her voice now firmer. "I used my platform to shine light on an injustice. If people paid attention because it was me, then good. That attention helped save her life." Robin's lips curved in, something between a smile and a grimace. "But who was truly saved, Kim? Alice Johnson, or your public image?" The words hit like a gavel striking wood. A murmur rippled through the studio audience, barely audible but electric. The tension no longer belonged just to Kim and Robin. It spilled outward, reaching every corner of the room through every television screen tuned in across the country. Kim blinked, visibly shaken now, but she forced herself to meet Robin's gaze. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, there was no script in her tone. "I care about the people I help, that's all that matters to me." The camera zoomed in, catching the faint tremor in her voice, the shift in her expression. She was not untouchable here. She was cornered. At home, millions of viewers leaned forward in their chairs. They had tuned in for morning chatter, but what they were witnessing felt different. It wasn't an interview. It was an interrogation. A courtroom trial disguised as television. And at its center sat one of the most powerful women in pop culture, stripped of control, battling not just Robin Roberts, but the judgment of the nation itself. The broadcast had only just begun, but already, everyone watching knew. This was not going to be a typical morning. This was the moment Kim Kardashian's polished empire would be tested against the weight of accountability, live and unedited. The segment had been pitched weeks earlier under the title Kim's Mission for Change. The producers had expected glossy footage. Kim seated elegantly, speaking in careful tones about law school studies, second chances, and her evolving identity beyond reality TV. It was supposed to be safe television, compelling enough for morning audiences, harmless enough for her brand. But Robin Roberts had her own agenda, A veteran journalist, she had long believed that morning news didn't have to be fluff, that real accountability could exist alongside celebrity profiles. As the studio cameras lingered on Kim's composed expression, Robin flipped a page of her notes, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "You've spoken about studying law, following in your father's footsteps," Robin began, her voice warm but edged with steel. "But there are people who say you're presenting yourself as something you're not. They argue that prison reform is being turned into a stage for your celebrity. How do you respond to those voices?" Kim adjusted herself in the chair. She had heard this critique before, though never so bluntly, never with such an audience. Her instinct was to pivot to her well-rehearsed answers, the talking points her team had drilled into her. "I've been working with lawyers for years now," she said, her voice measured, each syllable chosen with care. "I've studied, I've sat in legal meetings, I've poured hours into understanding these cases. It's not about me, it's about the people who deserve another chance at life." Robin tilted her head slightly, a gesture that landed like cross-examination. "And yet, many grassroots activists, people who have been fighting for criminal justice reform their entire lives, say your presence overshadows their work, that the media focuses on Kim Kardashian rather than the communities actually living through the injustice. Isn't that a valid concern?" The silence in the studio deepened. Viewers at home leaned in. The controlled, glowing world of morning television suddenly felt raw, unscripted. Kim's brow furrowed. "Visibility matters," she said firmly, her tone sharpening now. "If my platform can bring attention where there was none before, that's not overshadowing. That's amplifying. These issues weren't being talked about on this scale before. If people pay attention because my name is attached, that's a good thing." A faint stir in the audience. Robin pressed her lips together, her pen tapping once more against her notepad. She didn't interrupt immediately, letting the tension hang heavy in the air, the silence as piercing as any question. Finally, she leaned forward. "But isn't there a difference between amplifying and owning? Between shining light and standing in the spotlight? Do you ever worry that in the process of trying to do good, you've made yourself the center of the narrative?" The words landed with surgical precision. Kim blinked, her eyes flickering briefly toward the cameras before she steadied her gaze back on Robin. She crossed one leg over the other, an instinctive move to reassert control. "This isn't about me," Kim repeated, though the conviction in her voice wavered for the first time. "It never has been." But Robin didn't yield. She glanced down at her notes, then back up, her tone sharper now. "You've spoken often about following your father's footsteps, but Robert Kardashian was a lawyer who argued cases in court. He built his reputation in the crucible of real legal battles. You've taken the apprenticeship route, which is valid, but critics argue it's unconventional at best, and a publicity stunt at worst. How many cases have you personally argued? How many legal briefs have you written?" The words cut. Kim's jaw tightened. For a fraction of a second, she looked less like a confident advocate and more like a figure caught in the harsh light of interrogation. "I'm not claiming to be a lawyer yet," she replied, her tone bristling. "I'm in training, I'm studying, I've passed the baby bar, I've put in the hours, and I'll continue until I reach that goal. That's not publicity, that's commitment." Robin leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Her calmness was almost unnerving, like a judge watching a defendant unravel. "Commitment is admirable," she said quietly. "But the question remains, is this commitment to the law or to the brand of Kim Kardashian?" The air snapped tight around the words. In the control booth, a producer whispered urgently, "We need to go to break." Another shook his head, gesturing to hold. The tension was too good, too alive to cut away from. Kim's hands clenched, slightly in her lap, her voice rising now, colored with frustration. "I've used my influence for something bigger than myself. Isn't that what we want from people in my position? To take the spotlight and aim it where it matters? That's what I've done, and I won't apologize for it." Robin didn't flinch. She met Kim's fire with stillness, the silence itself an indictment. The camera captured every detail, the faint flush rising in Kim's cheeks, the tension in her jaw, the controlled steadiness of Robin's gaze. At home, millions of viewers recognized what they were witnessing. This wasn't the scripted PR story Kim's team had promised. This was something rawer, sharper, and unmasking. By the time the host shifted the conversation with a strained smile, the damage was done. The image of Kim Kardashian, calm, untouchable, unshakable, had cracked. The questions were no longer about reform alone, but about authenticity, credibility, and truth. The morning segment had been scheduled for 10 quiet minutes of uplift. Instead, it was fast becoming a national spectacle. And for Kim, the trial by fire had only just begun. The tension in the studio had shifted from subtle unease to something far heavier, almost judicial. The audience, both in the studio and across millions of television screens, felt it in their bones. The veneer of civility was cracking. Kim Kardashian, who had built an empire on controlling narrative, was being stripped of control one question at a time. Robin Roberts didn't look rattled. She looked deliberate. Years of navigating delicate interviews had sharpened her instincts. She understood timing, silence, and the power of pressing a wound at just the right moment. She leaned forward now, her tone even but her words cutting. "Kim," she said, letting the syllable hang for a beat, "you've told us this isn't about you. But isn't that precisely the problem? The critics say it's always about you, that families who fought for justice for decades suddenly find their loved one's story framed as a chapter in the Kim Kardashian redemption arc. Do you understand why people question your motives?" Kim's eyes narrowed. She exhaled, her breath sharp, shoulders stiffening. "I've never claimed credit for anyone's struggle," she said. Her voice quickened now, defensive. "What I've done is shine light on issues ignored by the system. If that visibility helps, then it's worth it. I don't see how that diminishes their story." Robin didn't nod. She didn't soften. "But the families say otherwise. They say the cameras follow you, not them. That their pain becomes your platform. So I'll ask you again. Isn't this at its core about Kim Kardashian?" A murmur rippled across the audience. The question, stripped of diplomacy, struck like a direct cross-examination in a courtroom. The kind that leaves no wiggle room. Kim leaned forward in her chair, her polished calm visibly fracturing. "I don't need to be here," she shot back, her tone tightening. "I don't need cameras, or interviews, or applause. I'm here because I care. Because someone has to." Robin's pen hovered over her notes, but she didn't write. Instead, she raised her eyes and delivered the blow. "If you care, Kim, then why do the people you claim to fight for often feel invisible standing beside you?" Kim's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, silence swallowed her. Her eyes darted toward the crew, toward the corners of the studio, searching for some foothold. She found none. In the control booth, producers shifted nervously, unsure whether to cut to commercial. But this was television gold, and they knew it. The tension wasn't just gripping, it was history being written live. Kim inhaled sharply, steadying herself. "You want to question me? Fine. But don't you dare question the impact. Alice Johnson walked free because we fought for her. That's not vanity, that's justice." Robin's voice dropped, softer but sharper, like the edge of a blade pressed against glass. "But who reaped the larger reward, Kim? Alice Johnson? Or you?" The words reverberated like a gavel strike. Gasps fluttered across the audience. One could almost feel the verdict forming in real time, the public's judgment shaping itself around Kim's faltering composure. Kim's eyes flashed, anger rising to mask vulnerability. "You're twisting this. You're trying to make it sound like helping people is selfish. How dare you? How dare anyone diminish the work I've done because of who I am?" Robin's gaze didn't waver. "No one is diminishing the work. The question is whose story is being centered. Because in this studio right now, the only name the audience is hearing is Kim Kardashian." Kim's chest rose and fell sharply. Her fingers curled against the armrest of her chair. For the first time in years, she looked less like an icon and more like someone cornered, fighting to hold on to her dignity under the glare of truth. At home, viewers sat stunned. The morning had transformed into something else entirely. Less entertainment, more tribunal. The celebrity who mastered the art of narrative was being forced to answer to a narrative she could not control. Kim leaned forward again, her tone colder now, measured, as if trying to regain ground. You want receipts? Fine, I'll show you. Every single person I've fought for, every life touched, those stories matter. And if I have to be the one to take the heat so the world notices, I'll take it. I'll take all of it. The words carried force, but there was a crack in them, a tremor that betrayed how shaken she truly was. Robin let the silence linger. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. The silence spoke for her, louder than any rebuke. In that silence, the world watching began to form its own conclusions. And for Kim Kardashian, that was the most dangerous reality of all. In the court of public opinion, silence often convicts louder than words. The cameras held on her face, the tension in her jaw, the faint glisten in her eyes. She was still, seated at the desk, but the stage had shifted. This was no longer Good Morning America. This was a trial by fire, and Kim Kardashian was the one on the stand. And Robin Roberts? She wasn't just the host. She was the prosecutor, relentless, steady, wielding questions like evidence, stripping away every layer of glamour until only truth remained. The confrontation had begun, and there was no walking back. The cameras had captured Kim's faltering smile, her stammering denials, her flashes of anger. All of it already clipped, ready to be dissected across the internet within minutes. But in the studio, the exchange was still unfolding like a trial, and Robin Roberts was far from finished. Robin tapped her pen against her notes, then turned a page. Her eyes locked on Kim with the steadiness of a judge preparing to admit evidence into the record. You've mentioned visibility, Robin said, her tone calm, deliberate. Let's talk about results. She glanced down at her paper, then back at Kim. Since you began your activism, overall incarceration rates have not shifted. In fact, some experts argue celebrity-driven reform efforts are cosmetic, high-profile, stories that don't address systemic change. They say you've centered anecdotes, not policy. The studio tightened. This wasn't just a question. It was an indictment backed by data. Kim straightened in her chair, her voice rising defensively. One person at a time matters. A mother reunited with her children, a father given a second chance. That is change. That's not cosmetic. That's life. Robin didn't interrupt. Instead, she let Kim's words hang, then slid another sheet of notes forward. Her voice sharpened. Grassroots activists, people who've given decades of their lives to this fight, say your presence has siphoned funding and attention away from organizations already doing the work. They call your movement a spotlight machine, not a reform effort. They say your brand is drowning out their voices. Do you understand how serious that accusation is? The words struck hard. Kim blinked, her lips parting as if to respond, but no words came. The cameras caught it all. The pause, the flash of uncertainty, the struggle to gather composure. Finally she spoke, her tone trembling but defiant. I can't apologize for caring. I can't apologize for having a platform. I've always said I'm not a politician, not a lawyer. Not yet. But if I can help even one person, isn't that better than staying silent? Robin leaned back, slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed on Kim. She spoke slowly, the weight of each word deliberate. Helping one person is noble. But this is about credibility. You claim to be a student of law. You invoke your father's legacy. You say you're studying to be an attorney. So let's ask plainly, how many legal briefs have you written? How many cases have you personally argued in court? The audience gasped, the air crackling with shock. Kim's mouth opened, but her words stumbled out. I'm still in training, she said quickly, her voice tinged with frustration. I've never pretended otherwise. I passed the baby bar, I'm working with incredible lawyers, and I'm committed to finishing. I don't have to prove every step on live television. Robin's reply was soft, but cutting. But that's what accountability is, Kim. Proving steps, proving substance, not just words. Kim's nostrils flared. Her hands tightened into fists in her lap, her tone sharpening into anger. "You're trying to discredit me. You're trying to make it seem like everything I've worked for is meaningless. That's not fair." Robin tilted her head, her gaze unblinking. "I'm not trying to make it seem like anything. I'm asking the questions the public already asks. They want to know if this is justice or branding." Kim's composure cracked. Her voice rose, emotional now, no longer polished. "You think I'm doing this for myself? You think I put myself through law school, through sleepless nights, through criticism and ridicule just for me? No. I've met with families. I've sat in prisons. I've cried with people who thought they would never see freedom again. Don't tell me that's branding." The silence afterward was suffocating. The audience didn't clap. They didn't move. They just watched, the tension holding them still. Robin let the silence linger, then spoke quietly, her tone nearly judicial. "No one is denying you've met with people. No one is denying you've cried. But tears don't change laws. Celebrity doesn't write policy. The people living through these struggles, they don't need another camera. They need systemic reform. And systemic reform requires more than visibility. It requires work. Deep, unglamorous, sustained work." The words settled like dust in the air, heavy, undeniable. Kim's face flushed. She shook her head, her voice breaking now, teetering between rage and vulnerability. "I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be. But I care. And if my name opens doors, if my fame forces people to pay attention, then I'll keep using it. I'll keep walking into rooms where no one else can, because someone has to." Her words cracked, emotion surging through her voice. She wasn't delivering lines anymore. This was raw, stripped of polish, her defenses crumbling under the relentless weight of Robin's interrogation. The camera zoomed in, capturing the sheen in Kim's eyes, the way her lips trembled as she pressed them together. The image that had dominated magazines and social feeds for over a decade looked suddenly human, fragile, even cornered. Robin didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply closed her notes, folded her hands, and let the silence carry. The audience, both in the studio and across the country, knew exactly what they were witnessing. This was no longer morning television. This was a public reckoning. And Kim Kardashian, for all her fame, money, and influence, sat at the center of it, struggling to hold on. The receipts had been laid on the table, and they spoke louder than any brand ever could.